I'm going to start recording, so welcome. We are now at the start of the YouTube video. Feel free to say hello to YouTube if you like, but if you don't like, then that is fine. We will get started in just a second. This is obviously a cigarette, tobacco only. Terms and services. Anyway, as you already all might know, but just for the sake of any YouTube viewers, welcome if you're watching this on YouTube. This is going to be a little talk about the history of atomic energy. There will be a follow-up to this in coming in later dates that will talk more about the atomic weaponry side, but today we're going to more focus on the energy side of it. We're going to more talk about the Curie family, like Marie Curie. I'm going to probably pronounce that wrong the whole time, but yeah, I'm terrible with pronouncing things, so I'm just over it at this point, and I hope you guys and girls are too. But yeah, originally I was going to talk about the Manhattan Project, but like I say, it kind of would make more sense if we talked about like just the process of what it was like, where it came from, like atomic energy to actually create the atomic weapons. So yeah, we're going to be focusing on the energy side rather than the weapons, but we will touch on that a little bit. But we'll have a later episode that will go into the weapon side of it in more depth. But I feel it will be better understood with today's episode, so yeah, hopefully today we can create and establish some sort of a timeline. Again, if I do get some things wrong or miss anything out, I really do apologise, but it shouldn't take too long, and we will obviously have a Q&A at the end. So yeah, I'm largely learning too, but I hope this is at least entertaining. So if you are ready, let's go, let's get this party started and jump in the time machine. Because, as always, to understand completely, we're going to have to travel back to 1898. 1898, where basically the Curies discovered something called pinch blende, which is what you can see in front of you. We now call it uranite, but it's an ore of uranium, which is basically like a raw form of uranium that contained an element which they then named radium. So the Curies actually helped rip aside the veil that hid radioactivity, and they even coined the term for that too. So the Curies actually made the word radioactivity up as well, which I think is pretty cool. At that point they discovered two new elements, polonium and radium, and from that they made artificial radioactivity from stable elements such as boron and magnesium. But it was all about the uranium and radium at this point, because radium emitted large amounts of radioactivity. And that was obviously the whole point of it, and that's kind of like a lump of radium. Looks pretty cool, right? But now, like I say, known as uranite now, an ore of uranium contained an element which they named radium. Sorry, I've already told you that bit. They realised the atoms were breaking down and turning into different elements, and at this point hopes were raised that tremendous amounts of energy could be harnessed through such a process. It is literally hard to overstate how important the Curie's work was in the early days, but it didn't come without its dangers, and later, less favourable uses, of course, as we know today. But we'll go into a little bit about who the Curies are, because I really do think that they deserve a little bit of the spotlight. So, Marie Curie, she was a Polish-born genius, and as she's often remembered today, and her husband Pierre, their daughter Irene and son-in-law Frederick were basically colossuses of physics and chemistry in their time, and even still today, like basically influencing modern day chemistry and physics, between all of them racking 5 Nobel Prizes in just over 3 decades. So in the early days, arriving as a student, Marie Curie went to Paris in 1891. She experienced grinding poverty, xenophobia and hostility from the scientific establishment, but at age 24 she followed her elderly sister, where she earned higher degrees, and it was in 1895 that she married the French physicist Pierre Curie, who obviously also had a massive influence on her work and the larger work at kind of scale. But yeah, going back a century, physicists often had to make their own instruments just to be able to measure their own experiments, which I think is pretty bloody wild. That's Marie Curie right there. because everything was still rather new at that point, and it was a lot harder than it was today. But to prove the discoveries, like basically beyond a reasonable doubt and beyond any doubt, the Curies sought to isolate polonium and radium in a pure form from pinchblende. This is a very complex mineral, pinchblende, and the chemical separation of its constituents was an arduous task, to say the least, that nobody had ever actually tried to do and basically didn't have a clue what it was going to entail. Even more terrifying, they didn't even know that it was dangerous, which I forget to point out early on. But they didn't even know it was dangerous, like, but I'll get into that a little later anyway. But yeah, so to make things even worse, Pierre and, I'm going to call them Pierre and Mary from now on. Pierre and Mary, oh it's Marie in it, Pierre and Marie, had a basically broken building where they carried out a now legendary search for radium. It was literally like a dilapidated building with this lab that they kind of all worked out of, and what they actually did is between them hauled in a ton of pinchblende, which is a radioactive ore in case you missed that bit, from a mine in Bohemia and separated it in what was effectively a shed, boiling up the material with toxic chemicals and stirring it in a cauldron with a heavy iron bar, literally like some witchcraft shit. After 3 years of really intense labour, they had actually isolated 1/10 of a gram of radium chloride in 1902. So this was a massive step. It obviously proved the existence of this element, and then later went on to influence way more, as we'll find out. But the buildings had like no safety measures, which I think is just insane. It was poorly ventilated and let in rain. They worked with no gloves or goggles for the most part, and a lot of the tools that they made were literally home and handmade, which is just insane. At night, unaware of the peril still at this time, they apparently admired the fruit of their work as it lays on a pine table, and tubes of radium fragments let off a pretty bluish like glow, fairy-like glow in Marie's words, which we actually have a picture of. We actually have loads of pictures of her notebooks and stuff because they're still preserved. But even today, these notebooks that were recorded, from 1897 to like 1900, are so radioactive to this day that any scholars that wish to consult them at France's National Library actually have to sign a certificate that they are basically doing at their own risk. So yeah, that's pretty nuts. Like, even the notebooks are dangerous to go near. It was that flipping radioactive in there. But they contributed highly to healthcare too. It wasn't just like like crazy witchcraft and mad science stuff. They actually pioneered the first studies into isotopes to kill tumorous cells, going as far as to set up mobile X-ray machines for hospitals on the World War I trenches. I mean, mad accolades right there. Under her direction, the world's first studies were conducted into the treatment of neoplasms, which is basically an abnormal and excessive type of tissue growth that we now know are damaged and effectively stopped by radioactive isotopes. Now we know that it's like radiation therapy, but I mean, this shit was getting done in 1903. It is hard to overstate how insane that actually is. But anyway, in 1903, she became the first woman to receive a Nobel Prize, sharing the physics award with Henry Becquerel, who was also another really important person in the physics kind of game, if you like. 8 years later, important to note, she became the sole winner of a Nobel Prize for chemistry, and I think she actually remains the only individual ever to win a Nobel Prize in multiple sciences. Really cool. But yeah, at that time, nothing at all was known about ionizing radiation or particles that snap DNA bonds in cells, basically turning them cancerous. In fact, it was quite the opposite. Which, yeah, this part starts to get pretty mad. So in the 1920s, posh families would buy special taps with radium salt tablets to make their drinking water curative, but it was literally making it toxic and radioactive. Wealthy women would buy Thorada, which is what you can, or Thoradia, which is what you can see on the screen right now, which was a beauty cream created by a guy called Dr. Alfred Curie, no relation to the other Curies, but that was also toxic, plus loads more crazy stuff that they was using, like radioactive kind of stuff for. But this little passage from Wikipedia sums like that whole thing up really good. Radioactive quackery is quackery that impromptu promotes radioactivity as a therapy for illnesses. Unlike radiotherapy, which is the scientifically sound use of radiation for the destruction of cells, usually cancer cells, quackery pseudoscientifically promotes involving radioactive substances as a method for healing cells and tissue. It was most popular during the early 20th century after the discovery in the 1890s of radioactive decay. But yeah, quackery, right? What a funny word that is. I wanted to share that with you because I found that quite funny. But the awareness came tragically too late for Marie Curie. After years of exposure to radioactive elements and X-rays, she did eventually die of leukemia in 1934 at age 66. And she was basically a globally renowned megastar and showered with praise, and rightfully so too. But in the late 20s, but it's in the late 20s where atomic energy really takes a darker turn and starts to become more like what we associate with today. But that's kind of a part of early atomic energy. But the very first mention of atomic energy used as weaponry was in the H.G. Wells novel, The World Set Free, which was released just before the World War and sparked a little wave of fear about the usage of atomic energy as a weapon. Moving forward a bit, in 1933, the Nazis came to power in Germany and suppressed Jewish scientists, and in an ironic and fortunate twist of fate, those same scientists would become instrumental in developing the weapon that would basically end the Axis power reign of terror, in a way by fleeing other parts of the world like the States from fleeing to other parts of the world like the States and the UK, but you likely know that. But this was like an early kind of event that really triggered the idea of nukes sort of thing, and with the other things that were going on at the time, like nukes were becoming way more of a kind of a viable option. But shortly after fleeing to London, one of these scientists, Leo, Slazard or something? Can call him Leo Lizard. I'm just gonna call him Leo for now. Patented the idea of the nuclear chain reaction via neutrons. So this is obviously a very important part. And he also coined the term critical mass. So up until this point, there was no real way to actually turn into a bomb. There was theories, and like theoretically it was possible in smart people's minds, but there was no accepted actual method up until this kind of point where the idea of the nuclear chain reaction via neutrons was introduced, and the coin critical mass was basically introduced to describe the minimum amount of material required to sustain the chain reaction and its potential to cause an explosion. Obviously very important is that end bit, to cause an explosion. He hadn't actually intended the patent to be explicitly used for such a weapon though, because the concept of a chain reaction was still just a theory. But despite that, this dude Leo is considered to be academically the father of the atomic bomb, because like academically he did kind of get it started, which is fair enough. But Irene Juliette Curie, daughter of Mary and Pierre Curie, remember those two from earlier, and her husband Frederick actually discovered in 1934 that artificial radioactivity could be induced in stable elements by bombarding them with alpha particles, and in Italy, Enrico Fermi, who you may also know from the Fermi paradox, reported similar results when bombarding uranium with neutrons. So this is when nuclear fission was confirmed. So it is kind of convoluted, but in 1939, nuclear fission was confirmed in an experiment run by Otto Robert Frisch, who you also might have heard of. And fission is the nuclear reaction or radioactive decay process that occurs when the nucleus of one atom splits into two lighter nuclei as a result of enormous amounts of energy. As a result, enormous amounts of energy are released. So a little bit more of a complicated one is that diagram right there. I hope you can see that okay. Nuclear fission differs importantly from other types of nuclear reactions in that it can be amplified and sometimes controlled via the nuclear chain reaction, one type of a general chain reaction. So it gets way more complicated, and I am brushing over so much. If there's any chemists or whatever that watch this, they're probably going to absolutely rip that to pieces, but yeah, that's in a nutshell, that's kind of what it is. So in such a reaction, free neutrons released by each fission event can trigger yet more events, which in turn release more neutrons, and cause more fission. It's pretty crazy stuff, but you know what a chain reaction is, right? But it basically set a very important precedent for the world. Like this is when it kind of started to get really, really, really dark. So the first nuclear fission experiment in the United States was performed on January the 25th in 1939 in the basement of Pupin Hall, the physics department of the Columbia University in New York City, where scientists were able to replicate the experiment done by Frisch. The following year they discovered uranium-235, the active component of uranium and the purity needed to sustain a chain reaction. So obviously this patent right here is what it all is, but unless you're a scientist you pretty much don't have a clue what all this means. But yeah, this is all like the shit that was going on, and there's a lot of complicated shit that I have no idea how to even begin explaining, but apparently this was a massive step and a very important part. So yeah, the first paper to explicitly mention nuclear weapons as a mean for war, however, was titled Improvements in Explosive Charges, and this is what you're looking at now, and was filed in France by Julia Curies. The patent was applied for in 1939, but was only granted in 1950 because it was being held as classified by the French government for obvious reasons. And when the war started in 1939, many scientists likely to be persecuted by the Nazis had already escaped. People on both sides were well aware of the possibility of utilising nuclear fission as a weapon by this point, but no one was still sure how it was going to actually be engineered. Like, the theories were all there, it was all proved that it could be done, but nobody had actually put all these complicated pieces together in what would later become known as the Manhattan Project. So, that's where we're going to leave that one for today, ladies and gents. That's kind of like the earlier lead up to the Manhattan Project, and you can kind of see where I'm going with this, but rather than overload you all with too much information in one go, I decided to split this one up into two, like 15-minute sort of smaller little segments, but that is basically the run up to how the Manhattan Project was actually to come about. So rather than glossing over like everything, there's like a real sort of in-depth explanation of how the Manhattan Project was gonna come into inception. So basically the whole point of me doing this is so the Manhattan Project episode next time makes a little bit more sense to everybody, not just for everybody but more even for myself, because like knowing about the Manhattan Project first, because that's what I started first, I realised that I was missing a huge bit of information, which was effectively this part. So I will say thank you so much to everybody that has watched this. I really do appreciate all of you that have sat through this. I hope it was somewhat entertaining and somewhat educational. I honestly have no idea. I've had people read it and say that it was okay, but I don't know if I butchered that. I definitely butchered it in parts. Just had an idea. How about you start or end with an overview of bullet points? It's a lot of info for our brains. Yes, it is. that is a very good point. In the next episode, what I will do is start by doing a summary of this episode and basically do exactly that, seeing as I don't actually have bullet points ready right now. Yeah, that's a really good idea. I'll go back through this and basically tell you the key points, and hopefully that will make a little bit more sense. And like I say, we will elaborate on a few of the things that we've touched on a little bit more next time. But yeah, we definitely, I definitely didn't want to overdo you with too much information. I didn't want to overdo myself with too much information, mainly. You know me, I'm a total bozo. I had chillsense's Mike help me with his script. Otherwise, I would have had, like, no clue where to even begin with all this. So, I genuinely hope that made some sense. Obviously, going into this topic kind of without the years of training that most people do get to kind of understand this sort of stuff, it is very difficult to understand, and it's a very tall order to undertake for any of us to try and understand. So again, I really appreciate you all bearing with me, sitting through that and at least attempting to try and get through that. And yeah, I realised that it was getting complicated, which is why I stopped and thought, right, that needs to kind of end there, because that's kind of a really dense sort of topic. I think that was good, Kez. Agree with Silky Dub says, thank you so very much, man. I really appreciate that. I do agree. I'm really sorry I didn't have the foresight to think of this beforehand, but bullet points to summarise would have definitely been a great way to end. But that is definitely how I will start the next episode, with a brief overview of this, and hopefully that will summarise and tie it in a little bit. Yeah, definitely a lot of information, man, because like a lot happened, and that's what I realised, like the Manhattan Project and stuff. I was like, holy shit, there is so much that goes in before all this, like, which I'm sure you guys and gals will be interested in if you don't already know it, which is why I thought, do you know what, I'm pretty sure you'd appreciate the little 15-20 minutes that it might take just to get a bit of background on some of the things that we're going to then go into more depth on in the Manhattan Project episode. But thank you. Lady Chasm says, thank you for the amount of work you put into these. You are very welcome. I genuinely enjoy every aspect of these so very much. Not just writing them and basically creating them, but actually performing them. It is really nerve-wracking. I don't actually know how it is going to sound when I tell it out. There's things and phrases and terms that I aren't particularly familiar with myself. And yeah, that is definitely a dumb thing for me to want to try and do, to explain something I basically know nothing about. Which, yeah, I definitely recognise that. But A for effort, right? But no, the Manhattan Project episode now, and understanding just a little bit of the politics and stuff behind the whole lead up of the Manhattan Project, will make a little bit more sense, I think, with this, and with a definite recap of today for sure. Sorry, but let me continue on with Lady Chasm's comment before I forget. And I like the idea of an overview beforehand. It could really help with the denser topics. Yes, very true, very true. I absolutely could not agree more with that. That is such... I don't know how I didn't think of that. I am literally kicking myself for not thinking of that myself. That would definitely have benefited. Do you know, like, I guess when I'm writing it out, I don't want to sound condescending at the same time, but yeah, it is definitely like a lot to take in, for sure. Like, it is. I have had to read this a few times to be able to even get it to a point where I could read it out loud, because it is very complicated topics and stuff. for sure. But yeah, good amount of information. Well done, Marseilles. Thank you. But I thought you did an excellent job. Lady Chasm closes by saying thank you very much, Lady Chasm, for your comment. That is a very, very nice thing for you to say. And I really do hope that it does make the next episode a little bit more understandable, I suppose. But thank you, Mara, as well. Really appreciate that. I hope you enjoyed that. A+++ for effort, Silky says. Thank you so very much. I definitely couldn't have done this without the help from Mike. Mike definitely helped loads, chill senses, with this one, and even more so with the actual next one. This was kind of a late idea. Like, the Manhattan Project episode was ready until like yesterday, and then we sort of thought, wow, wouldn't it be really cool if we kind of split this up into two, and then really went into a little bit more depth of the real starting of nuclear weapons, because we kind of realised that there was a big difference between nuclear energy and atomic energy, and actually atomic weapons and atomic energy. And I thought, wow, that's really cool. I would love to try and explain that to you. And that is literally why this all came about, I swear. It's that simple. That's where it all comes from. I don't think it's a dumb thing to want to do. Sorry, Flipping Back says, my brain goes into autopilot when presenting. After presenting, I start thinking, oh, what the hell I even said? That is what I am doing right now, seriously. Oh my gosh. And because I've read it so much over the past few days, it can start to become like, it can start to sound a lot more normal than it would do to somebody who's just reading it for the first time, and I'm very aware of that fact. So yeah, that's always a factor that you've got to deal with. Like, you don't want, but the thing is as well, you don't want to over-explain stuff, but then you don't want to under-explain stuff. I did one before where I tried to explain like every little thing that would need to be explained to really understand the concept of what I was trying to kind of get across, but at the same time, it wasn't really a story. It read like a Wikipedia entry, and I thought, dude, I do not want this to sound like a Wikipedia entry. I put far too much time in for it to sound like I've stole this shit from Wikipedia. So yeah, that's kind of why I decided to at least like try and do it in a more story-like manner, which probably does sacrifice a little bit more of the informative side of things, I would have thought. I guess, because yeah, there is a really difficult balance between, because one video that I always think back to, Crash Course, the Crash Course episodes by John and Hank Green on YouTube. Now, they are so in depth, but going into those episodes, like, it's like so much to take in, and by the end of it, you just don't actually learn anything. Like, literally don't learn anything. It's only under intense repetition of the same episode that it actually sticks, because there's too much there. So I didn't want to do that in this, which I felt like that was going to happen with the Manhattan Project episode if we didn't do this first. So yeah, so I think that's where this comes from. But yeah, sorry, I don't think it's a dumb thing to want to do. It helps you learn when you explain something. I would totally agree with that 110%. It definitely makes a lot more sense when I explain it out, which is definitely why I try and say that this is more the documentation of my journey into sort of this topic, rather than like a complete overview and a go-to if you're going to be trying to pass a test on nuclear energy. Like, this isn't that one. You want to go see Crash Courses for that. So yeah, it's kind of, it is a bold thing to do. Maybe not dumb, but it is bold, I suppose. And I definitely feel like topics like this would therefore be best handled by like somebody who knows what they're talking about. But still, I don't feel like that means we are allowed to talk about it. We're not allowed to at least try and talk about these things and understand them as like laymen, I suppose, you know, like so yeah, that's kind of another angle that I suppose I take. But yeah, very true. Plus, I learned something from it, so thank you for sharing. That is awesome. I am really glad you learned something. I tell you one thing that I took away from this. First and foremost, that the Curies were absolutely incredible. Second and foremost, how insanely dangerous it was, but how late we realised how dangerous radioactivity was. Like the large, I need to rewatch. Oh, Lola, I'm really sorry. Welcome. This will be on YouTube very shortly, so don't you worry, lovely. Thank you for rewatching it, though. We've established that I defo needed to probably finish by bullet pointing it up. But maybe you could watch it again. I don't know. We would love to have the engagement over on YouTube too. Honestly, I am definitely gonna upload it though. That's for sure. So I hope you guys and gals don't mind being showcased a little bit on YouTube. But like I said, there's literally 10 people that watch them, and I'm probably one of them, or my dad's probably 2 of them. So yeah. And if anything, quick side note, Twitch doesn't record your streams unless you actually record them to your computer. So when this is gone now, it'll be gone unless it's uploaded somewhere. So there is that. But I do really like to look back on like my earlier work, and even for other people as well. You know, somebody that I direct to the YouTube channel now, they can really see in the early days, the start of the YouTube channel, how it has kind of progressed, which I think is really cool. How these episodes have become like more frequent, more in depth. I think a little bit like better, but maybe only in very minute and small, unmeasurable quantities. But I do feel like I'm getting more comfortable in this position of actually doing these things. And one thing that I do have to remind myself of is most people would probably not do this live. They would probably try not to do this live, and there'd be about 1,000 jump cuts in it. So I'm proud of myself for even daring to be so flipping ridiculous to do something. That is one thing that I'm very proud of myself for doing. But yeah, thank you for all your comments, everybody, man. I really appreciate you all. And you're all so very nice and kind to me. Holy smokes. But thank you for sharing. Lady Chasm says, you are very welcome. I really appreciate you all joining. I swear, I know I say that I am British. I overuse thank yous so much, but I genuinely mean it. Like, you know, not to mention I was in a bad spot a couple of years back, and it's just crazy to think that you guys and gals are here with me and we're doing this right now. Like, it really is when I try to wrap my mind around that. If you'd have asked me a couple of years ago, which is only a real short amount of time really in the grand scheme of things, if I would have been sat here in front of 13 people talking about the history of atomic energy, I would have literally ruffled at you, or is it rollfold at you? I would have rolled on the floor laughing for sure, because there would have been no part of me that would ever believe that I'd have even tried to do something like this, let alone have people here that would even slightly enjoy it. So thank you, I really appreciate it, man, I really do. Honestly, this has been a dream of mine for one of the longest times ever, and I cannot tell you how much it means. Like, I genuinely can't. But that's going to be the end of the YouTube video. However, it's not going to be the end of our Q&A, so I hope you guys can stick around. But for anybody that's watched this on YouTube, thank you for watching on YouTube. Oh my gosh, how awesome. We stream every day on Reddit, and we stream every other day on Twitch now. So yeah, if you want to say bye to YouTube now, you could say so and appear in the comments here. Mountain Girl, hey! Oh, wait, you could appear in the comments here. I will never get used to doing that, I really won't. But yeah, if you want to say bye to YouTube, you can do and stick there. See you, YouTube! Yay, we got one person. That'll do me just fine. And hey, Mountain Girl, welcome! So we're going to stay for a little bit after this. So yeah, if you're watching on YouTube, you need to come and follow us and drop us a follow on Twitch. And come and find us doing lives and doing all kinds of crazy, dumb stuff and talking for hours and hours. So yeah, this is where I think I'm going to do these kind of things from now on. And the other kind of things, I'll stick to Reddit. I hope that works for everybody else, but I feel like these are a little bit more private, and I don't feel like as pressurized in this environment. So yeah. Anyway, bye YouTube, end recording only.